Listen, if you don't want to watch the whole video, I understand. To save you some time, all you gotta do is cheat. Just be like me and cheat. What's up, y'all? OPTCG here. Today I got for you the OP-10 pre-release guide. I'm going to be showing you some key cards, some relevant leaders to play, some strategies that you can enforce, and let's get right into it. So the basics, if this is your first pre-release event, pretty much you go to your store and it's a draft format style event. They are going to give you 6 booster packs of the new set OP-10 Royal Bloodline. Then from that, you are going to open those booster packs and build your 40 card deck with whatever cards you have in those booster packs. There is no restriction of the amount of copies of each card that you can have per deck. There is also no leader color restriction. So you can have a red leader and use purple cards or blue cards or whatever cards you open. You can also use any leader from the past or any leader that you open. Another part of the basics outside of deck building are general cards you want to look for. Whenever you're deck building, some just good stuff cards you want to put in. You really want to find some 2K counter cards like this beige over here, not him specifically, but just auto include any 2Ks you find. Vanilla statted units are always good just because they are really efficient stats for the cost, and playing them on curve and keeping them there will pay dividends in the long run, as well as cheap chump blockers, little weenie blockers that you can play in the interim to protect yourself from dying or to protect board or to force some sort of removal from your opponent. One of the initial things you're going to want to do when it comes to this event is just high roll. Just pull better, just draw better. That is the #1 strategy I can advise you with. You're gonna want to play any of these super rares that you see here on the screen, whether it be from Captain Kidd, Smoker, Rosinante, Kyros, Sanji, Law, and the Luffy secret rare. Those Law secret rare as well as the Luffy secret rare may not be the best hits. The secrets this set are not that good in my opinion, but these are definitely like the best supers you can pull. If you don't know what they do, the 8-cost Captain Kidd on play, he trashes one of your opponent's life for free. End of turn, if your opponent has 2 or less life cards, you get to draw 1 card and discard 1 card. So it also helps you filter your hand to get some bricks or get some unimportant cards out of your hand and helps you draw into new ones. Then you have 5-cost Smoker, who's a 7K with Banish, meaning whenever they hit your opponent life, it goes directly to trash and they cannot trigger it. It also has Activate Main, set one of your Dawn cards as active, with the stipulation that you can no longer set Dawn cards as active through character effects for the rest of the turn. Next, you have 5-cost Rosinante. On play, you may trash 1 event card from your hand and draw 2 cards. End of turn, if you have 7 or more Dawn cards, set up to 2 of them as active. And this is just 7 or more Dawn cards in general. They don't have to be active. They count as rested and they count as attached. As long as you have 7 or more Dawn cards on your field, at the end of your turn, you will be able to untap 2 Dawn. Next, we have the Sanji, 3-cost, 3K power. On your turn, that character has plus 3K power. So Sanji is a 6K power for 3 costs, which is really good. And then on KO, the Sanji will draw you a card, meaning that if it dies to battle or if it dies to a KO effect, you draw a card. Really good card. Next, we have 7-cost Kyros, 9K Kyros. Next, we have 7-cost Kyros, 9K power. On play, return an opponent's 5-cost or lower to their hand. Really good play on curve, vanilla stats. It doesn't have any counter, but it's a big body. It removes the body. Really good card. Next, we have 7-cost Secret Rare Law. On play, reveal a supernova type character card from your hand, add it to the top of your life cards, face down. Then if your leader is a supernova, give up to 1 rested Dawn to your leader. So this is meant to be played with like the Yellow Kid or the red, yellow, green Law leader. If you want to, you can also play this in mono green Bonnie, that leader, because she is a supernova as well. Outside of that, if you do draft enough supernovas, you being able to heal 1 is pretty good. But aside from that, it's a 7/9 vanilla stat lighted body, and you want to play vanillas anyway. So this is a pretty good boss monster. It can heal you if you have a supernova in hand. I don't see why won't you play it. And then you have this 6-cost Luffy, 6-cost, 7K power, 1K counter. Once per turn, this character would be killed by your opponent's effects. I'm sorry, once per turn, this character cannot be killed by your opponent's effects. And then when attacking, you may place 3 cards from your trash to the bottom of your deck in any order. Then if your opponent has 5 or more cards in hand, your opponent trashes 1 card from their hand. So this is a little bit of hand disruption as well as a sticky body in case your opponent does draft a decent amount of removal to try and get rid of this card. Next, we are going to talk about the meta leaders you can expect to see on your battlefield, and leaders you should be trying to play if you want to win. We have the new Sanji from PRB, 5 life mono red leader. Activate main once per turn. Up to one of your 8 cost or lower characters without an on-play effect gains rush until the end of this turn. Sanji gives all of your non-on-play units rush, meaning he's a very aggressive leader. He gets value immediately. He can trade into board immediately. He can take advantage of a lot of when attacking effects and what have you. I don't want to read all these leaders, guys. I'm not going to read these leaders verbatim, but I'm just going to kind of give you an idea of what they do. Katakuri, when he's attacking, if you have a Dawn on him, you get to look at either of your lives, and then he gains plus 1k power. He's going to discard a card, gain a life from the top of his deck, but that's only one time. Yamato, leader with double attack, and activate main. If your opponent has 3 or less life, you get to move 2 rested Dawn to one of your characters. Shanks, whenever your opponent attacks once per turn, he gets to give whatever's attacking. I'm sorry, not whatever's attacking, but he gets to give something minus 1k power. Captain Kidd, you rest 3 Dawn, you discard a card, you get to restand him. Zoro, whenever you attach a Dawn to him, he gives all your characters plus 1000 power. Bonnie, whenever your opponent attacks once per turn, she rests a Dawn. She gets to rest any of your units or your leader. Cool. My number one recommendation for this format is like Sanji and or Bonnie and then Enel. I think those are my top 3 leaders if you own them. If not, Zoro, Kid, Katakuri, Yamato are also good options. But be prepared to see a lot of Sanjis. Honorable mention / spicy stuff. So these are leaders that you want to play if you don't necessarily want to win but want to have a good time, and that these are leaders that I think have some interesting synergies that can catch people by surprise. Them being Lim from OP-10. The reason why I put her here is because she has a lot of Odyssey cards in this set. I think she gets like 6 or 7 Odyssey cards. And aside from that, you can also just play random good top end because she is a ramp leader. Unfortunately, all of her bodies come in rested, meaning that your opponent would be able to get some immediate value by trading into them. But if you can negate that with a lot of the good on play and synergy in the Odyssey archetype, you may be able to outvalue your opponent. Sugar, I think this is low-key my pet deck, my pet leader of the pre-release event format. Also a leader I kind of want to make work on the side as well. I think she has a cool leader ability. For if you don't know, end of turn, if you have a Don Quixote pirate with 6k or more power, you get to set 1 Don as active. And then on your opponent's turn, when you activate an event, you get to set up 1 Don from your Don deck as active. So whenever she uses counter events, she's going to ramp a Don at least once. This really helps her being a defensive leader as well as ramping into a powerful late game. I'll speak to more as to why she's like considered a spicy stuff leader when I go over some of my key card choices and synergies. Next, we have Red Green Smoker, another new leader from this set. On your opponent's turn, your characters with Navy or Punk Hazard trait gain plus 1k power, meaning, you know, what it says there. And then we have his activate main ability. If you have a character with 7,000 or more power, you get to set 2 Don as active. So this really is a really versatile leader ability. You can be offensive or defensive with it. You can play a 6,000 power unit, attach 1 Don to them, now they're 7,000, and then you can untap 2 Don and then play a chump blocker or maybe an event, or I'm sorry, leave up that Don for a counter event. Interesting leader. You might be able to do some cool stuff with it if you're lacking in leaders. Now we're going to talk about general strategy and play style you want to have for whatever you draft. I understand you want to put in just good stuff into your decks, but you also want to build around your leader to some degree. And it's my pro tip / recommendation that when you assemble all of your cards together, you choose your leader after you see what you have in your pile of cards. What I mean by that is if you notice you draft a lot of counter events and then you pull the Sugar leader, maybe you want to play Sugar or Green Purple Doflamingo, a leader that can play with their active Dawn on their opponent's turn to gain advantage, right? So if you end up with a bunch of Divine Departures and you pull a few of these, or you pull a Rosinante or 2 and some of these counter events, and then you have some good vanillas, blockers, and some top end to go with it, you can justify playing Sugar over Green Yellow Yamato just because your deck initially has more synergy. Whereas with Sanji, right, he gives rush to a whole bunch of units that don't have on plays, and this set has a pretty decent amount of units where like vanillas are always going to be good in him. This Cavendish here is a when attacking card, it draws 2 and trashes 1, so that helps you filter through your deck and gets more resources. This Ryuma has double attack whenever you put a Dawn on him. The Inazuma rests an opponent's character whenever, by calculating both you and your opponent's life total. Basically, if you have 2 life, your opponent has 2 life, that means when this Inazuma attacks, they can rest a 4 cost or less. And the Emporio Ivankov is activate main, give 3 evolutionary type characters plus 1k power until the end of your turn, and then you take a top card of your life to your hand. So you can build this like revolutionary army Sanji strategy, and out of nowhere, if your Rev army sticks to board, play this Ivankov, activate the Ivankov, and now your Revs are swinging with like a lot of value, and then the Ivankov also has rush, right? And another thing is too, like, let's say you do draft a lot of revolutionaries as well, you can justify bringing a leader like Bello Betty or Red Yellow Sabo, who have like inherent rev army synergies. Now I'm going to take a look at some cards that you may look over, but can indeed be some key cards as a part of your strategy. We have this Chopper, who's 2k and a blocker, as well as on your opponent's turn, they gain plus 2000 power, meaning they're a vanilla stated blocker on your opponent's turn, as well as a 2k counter in hand. I think if you get any of these, it's an auto include in your deck because it's a 2k and a blocker. We have this Edward Newgate. If you have 2 more rested characters, rest up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 5 or less, then you KO an opponent's rested character with a cost of 3 or less. This can tap a blocker as well as KO that same blocker, or just tap one of your opponent's 3 costed units on curve. Really good card, but remember you have to have the 2 rested units in the first place. Same goes for all of these other Odyssey cards. Anel says the same thing. 2 rested. If you can draw 3 cards and trash 2 cards from your hand. Very good hand cycling and filter. If you are able to have the rested units, playing this card is really good. Dracula Mihawk, if you have 2 or more rested characters, you can restand one of your rested Odyssey characters. If you build a lot of Odyssey, this Mihawk can get you a bunch of value, and it can also help you clear board by untapping another Odyssey unit and then getting in for more swings. We have this Cavendish. It just draws 2 trashes 1 when attacking. You know, pre-release formats notoriously don't really have much removal, meaning that this card will usually just stick and get value the turn after it's played, unless you're on Sanji, where it'll get value immediately. Next, we have the 3 cost Marco blocker. It's a blocker, it doesn't have counter, it's vanilla statted, and then on KO, return up to one of your opponent's characters with a cost of 4 back to their hand. So he is a crash out. If he goes, he's taking somebody with him. I think this is a really good defensive card as well as offensive card, because if you swing with this and then your opponent decides to swing into it, they're losing a body. Meanwhile, you were able to pressure their life or one of their bodies. We have this Burgess. If you have 8 or more cards in your trash, he gains rush. So for 6 Dawn, you're getting a 6/7 with rush. In the late game, this can very well matter, especially if you're not on a Sanji leader. This can be one of the things that closes out your game. Or even if you are on Sanji leader, you can play a 4 cost like this Hawkins or Ryuma, and then play this for 6, and then now you're attacking with the 4/6 and the 6/7, you know, out of nowhere for all your 10 Dawn. Next, we have this Frankie blocker, and then the on KO isn't really that super beneficial unless you dress a decent amount of Dressrosa cards, but nearly stated vanilla blocker. I think you would include this anyway. Ryuma, really good aggressive card, vanilla statted. The only quote-unquote issue with the card is that it's a brick, but really good to play on curve. I don't see why you wouldn't play this. This Inazuma, in a lot of these pre-release situations, people will just block her up towards the end game, so being able to rest your opponent's chump blocker and go for a lethal finish is, I think, will pay dividends. This Hawkins, on KO, trash up 1 card from your opponent's life cards. So when this Hawkins die, he's a little bit of another crash out. If he dies, he's taking one of your opponent's lives. Good burn card, sort of a 2-for-1. I think it's an auto include when you like run out of like the vanillas and the 2Ks and the blockers you want to put in your deck. Next, you have this Heat and Wire. This is sort of like the Inazuma, except it's an on play. So you're resting one of your opponent's characters with the combined total of your and opponent's life cards. So if you have 2 life, your opponent has 2 life, on play this will rest a 4. Or if you have 2 life, your opponent has 0, on play this will rest a 2. Next, we have this Zoro. If you have less life than your opponent, he gains rush. This is an interesting rush option. It's also a vanilla stated body. Issue is it's a brick and it's conditional rush. So other than that, it's still a vanilla. You kind of want to play it. Next, we have this, I think it's called Snow Globe in English. They usually don't like leave these cards untranslated when they bring them here, and I'm not gonna use the 16 syllables to pronounce this. Anyway, we have Snow Globe, counter event. Choose up to one of your opponent's leader character. I'm sorry, choose up to one of your leader characters. It gains plus 3,000 power. Afterwards, one of your opponent's leader characters gains minus 2,000 power for the turn. So this can give you plus 3k and subtract something on your opponent's side of the field, minus 2k. Really good against the mono green kid leader who swings twice. It's just a really good card. Divine Departure, this is one of the first cards we're going to get in the next few sets of cards that where you can rest additional Dawn for another effect, or you can keep the Dawn up on your turn for the guard point effect where it gives you plus 3k. For 6 Dawn, the one you pay to like play this, as well as for the 5 extra Dawn, you get to KO one of your opponent's 8k or less. So for 6 Dawn, you're KOing an opponent's 8k or less. So this is removal and a defensive card. Please play this card if you draft it, but just don't play it against me. Next is Radio Knife. 4 Dawn, rest one of your opponent's 6 or lower, then KO one of your opponent's rested 5 cost or lower characters, with the trigger being rest one of your opponent's 4 cost characters. So the trigger rests exactly a 4. It doesn't say 4 or lower. So be careful if you trigger this against an opponent. But the activate main is just spot removal. It's a little bit like Jet Pistol. I don't see why you wouldn't run it. If you're ahead on board and you can afford to remove something, or you just want to remove a blocker, or it has extra utility where it can tap an opponent's blocker and then KO something else that they swung with. Just a very ambidextrous, very, utility centric card that you can use. Very flexible. Next, we have Bari Bari Pistol. This bottom decks an opponent's 6k or less character. The trigger does the same thing. I think it's a pretty interesting card. It's more spot removal. It's sort of like Jet Pistol and Red Rock, but for Red Rock, you're bottoming anything. However, in this limited format, you're gonna take all the removal you can get, right? So if you have like 2 bodies on board, your opponent just played one of their 6k bodies on board, you have some power reduction. I think this can help you get out of a tight spot, or the trigger can actually save you from dying. Just if you're missing some cards and you want to fill up your bulk, just don't count this card out. Next, we have Bagworm. Activate main, draw 1 card, then bounce one of your opponent's 2 cost or lower characters. So for 3 Dawn, you're drawing a card as well as bouncing that chump blocker. This can help you close out games and go for lethal, or this can help you bounce one of your opponent's blockers and then be able to trade one of your big bodies into their bodies, or it can allow you to get some pressure in too. And if neither of those works, then you can just draw a card. I think this is a key card, pretty underrated. The trigger also says return one of your opponent's 2 cost or lower characters to their hand. That card can, if your opponent missequences, plays their chump blocker, then swings into you. If you trigger this, you can return their chump blocker to hand, and now they're just dead on the crackback or in a worse spot. Next, we have God Thread. For 5 Dawn, this KO is a 5, and then you gain 1 Dawn as active. The trigger is you're wrapping 1 Dawn as active. I think this is pretty good spot removal. If you are behind by like 1 character on board, playing this instead of playing a character, or if you're ahead, playing removal feels nice, and being able to ramp it on as active in like the earlier turns can really help you eke out value against your opponent. So maybe you can establish like a 7 costed unit on the turn you would have played a 6 costed unit, And then we have Damned Punk. Activate main, you can check either of your opponent's lives and then move it, so you can help play around some of your opponent's triggers, or see if they have a key card, move it to the bottom, or you can set up one of your key cards at the bottom of your life if you want to. Then you get to KO a 5 or less. Pretty good spot removal. Life manipulation is good too. The trigger is also hand filtering. I think this is a great card to draft if you see it. And then lastly, we have Room. If you have 1 or less life, give something plus 3k power for the battle. Then you get to restand one of your 5 cost or lower characters. Trigger, draw a card. So in a pinch, this is a guard point, as well as this can untap a blocker. So you can block and counter with that same 5 cost and then untap it. Pretty crazy a card, but just that 1 life or lower stipulation is very interesting. However, in this sealed format, if you have the space in your deck or you're looking for more cards to fill it in, like I said, be on the lookout for this card. All right, yeah, I think that's going to be it for me today, guys. Please let me know. I posted this on Twitter a little bit earlier today. What are your big four leaders going into this pre-release season? For me, I got Sanji, Bonnie, and Nell and Kid. However, I think Sanji is going to be Sanji, Bonnie, and Nell running through your local scene. Anyway, let me know if this video helped you or not, or if it didn't, and then post your pre-release win. Say, hey, Dark Show, I won my pre-release thanks to you. Or not. Y'all have a good one, guys.